right, Wolfpack Nation, we are back once again here for part 2 of our offense breakdown. And now we got Macon Adams joining us here. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties that kind of kept him on the bench on the sideline for the first part, but he was a part of it, listening in. So now we can actually have him tuning in here. So obviously we got Phillip Danford here with IPS. If you haven't checked out part 1 yet, where we broke down quarterbacks and wide receivers, really kind of what's the ceiling for Devin Leary? Make sure to check that out. That is a must watch or listen, so check that one out first. But now we're going to be kind of talking more about the running backs, tight ends, and the offensive line. So, kind of talking a little bit about running backs. So obviously we mentioned, obviously you're going into season knowing that it's Jordan Houston's backfield, and it's his to lose. I mean, honestly, it was really honestly impressive to me in the first place that he hadn't transferred sooner. I mean, and I think that really kind of speaks a lot again to Doran's culture that he's built there, but also to, the trust that Houston has in Doran, because, obviously Doran was saying your time will come. And obviously, most coaches might tell the player that because they want him to stick around, but are they actually meaning it? Who knows? So, hats off to Doran to, again, obviously growing that trust with Jordan, but also to hats off to Jordan for buying into the program, buying into Doran, and buying into, what his role can be here. Because, I think that it's setting up for this being his year. But, what do you kind of see as really the ceiling for Jordan Houston this year, Phillip? Because, I think that we've seen a lot in terms of his pass catching ability, and we've seen some of his running ability for sure. But, what do you kind of see for him this year? Can we see a breakout from him this year?
Yeah, I very much think the potential is there to have, I always think they're going to split up the carries. Like, I don't see Doran ever having like a full-time running back outside of maybe the Reggie Gillespie. I want to say there was an injury and he kind of got left, as the main dog that his senior year, I want to say. But outside of that, they've always divvied up the carries. So, frankly, if I'm being honest, like, do I think Jordan Houston gets 1,000 yards? Probably not. But do I think he can get 700 yards, something like that? I think it's a great year, most likely, to be honest with you. This is a guy who, he came onto the scene, true freshman in 2019. That was a little bit of a rough year, but he really showed a lot in that year. He showed some things to work on. I went back and watched some of the Jordan Houston carries from last year, and I really still am reverting back to my notes from 2019 when I broke down the film, because I don't know if I really got enough in like the real hard, in-game situations where it mattered, and it wasn't late in the game. But, I thought Houston, I'll tell you, the one thing that at the time, and we'll see, I bet he's better at it now. I guarantee he is. The one thing I wrote down is where I thought he could get better as a freshman was he's so fast. Mm-hmm. At times he would outrun the blockers, right? So let's say we're running like a gap scheme, counter, right? So we've got linemen pulling. He would beat the lineman sometimes. It's like, all right, well, let's calm down, slow down, right? You gotta time it, you gotta pace it, right? That was the one thing, right? I'm sure he's used to coming up in high school. He's the fastest guy on the field, and you got to slow it down. So I'm excited to see that. It's going to be fascinating. That the running game was much maligned last year. It was probably not as good as you expected, coming with two quality running backs in Donovan Knight and Ricky Person, and then the best run blocking left tackle, I've really seen. I don't know if I can name a better collegiate one, to be honest with you, in Iquanu. So, the total really didn't add up. So how do they get better this year? And so it's going to be fascinating, from my standpoint of, do they change up the running game a little bit? So what I mean by that is last year we were predominantly a wide zone team, right? They typically run wide zone. And now not as much as they did, prior to Beck, but Beck still runs wide zone mostly. They mixed in about 50 snaps of running counter and gap scheme. But I thought last year, Zonovan Knight was a much better wide zone runner. And I thought Ricky Person was a better gap scheme runner. And at times, I will tell you, I thought maybe when they were in, what they were running didn't quite match their skill sets. So I'm fascinated to see, what do we think the skill set of a Jordan Houston is, right? And maybe you guys, you can chime in here. Let me kind of explain to you what I look at when I'm kind of breaking down. I think a wide zone runner of a guy, I'm thinking vision, I'm thinking decision-making and burst, right? Because you hear a one-cut runner, right? You hear that all the time when talking football, one-cut runner. Because wide zone says, all right, you're going to aim at the ghost tight end or the tight end's butt. That's your aiming point.
Right.
Once you get at least 3 steps down, if you have a crease to your left, you're reading the linebackers and the flow, and you're reading the leverage of your blocks. You've got to have the vision, the decision making, and then you've got to go. That's where the burst comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we think that's Jordan Houston? I mean, I kind of think that is. And if it is, he probably will have a good year, because I don't imagine State's going to change things up dramatically.
No.
But, I think when you talk gap scheme, so let's talk, what are the qualities of a gap scheme runner? Well, it's being patient, waiting on your guys to get there, because you're not necessarily picking your hole in a gap scheme. It's already kind of a predefined hole, because you have guys pulling and they're kind of sealing you an alley. Mm-hmm. And now you're going to have to make usually one guy miss when you're in gap schemes. So does he have the patience? Can he hit that hole and make a guy miss? That's the way I kind of look at these two different run families. And what do we think they can do? I think Houston's going to be a wide zone runner, but time will tell. When he goes in and gets 12, 15 snaps, and we're game 3, game 4, I think we'll finally really get a good idea of what he is.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm curious about here, because I look back at the stats between Zonovan and Ricky and what they were. Actually, I'm trying to think now. They had like a nickname they were going for when they were playing. It was kind of odd. I can't remember what it was, but they're like about 75% of the rushing snaps, the rushing attempts, I should say, are for those two guys, and those are open. So you got 75% of your rushing attempts that are now available to Jordan and to Delbert and to Demi and those guys. But I'm curious, when you go to look back at the passing yards from last season, or the rushing attempts last season, I believe if you look back, the State was not great at it. State was like second to last. They didn't run the ball as well as, or as much, I should say, as other teams did. But you look at it comparatively, they're like second to last, right behind Virginia, who had Brendan Armstrong, who was throwing it all over the place. And then the other two that were right above them were Miami and Pitt, who had Van Dyke and who had, Kenny Pickett. So clearly the teams that have the better quarterback, a quarterback that is a great quarterback who can throw well, they're obviously going to lean on that. It's more explosive plays. And Ricky Percy, Zonovan Knight was your leading rusher, but he had like 700 some yards for the season. So how much of a gap, or a cap, I should say, does having an elite quarterback put on the run game when you're banking on the fact the quarterback's going to be just shotgunning it all the time, just throwing the ball? I mean, it takes away from the running game, but I obviously know Doran likes to be balanced. So can you talk about the dynamic of a quarterback, how that impacts the running game, especially when you have a proficient one like you have with Leary?
I'll tell you, I really kind of go back to Doran's comment about, what is the NC State offense? We're going to take what the defense gives, right? And we've had this discussion at IPS, quite a bit the last couple months where, we're going to be a predominant passing team. State will throw the ball. Don't get me wrong. But if we go back to take what the defense gives you, we said in the other episode, what do I think the defense will give? I think it's going to be a lot of too high coverage, right? So we're going to have too high safeties. In those situations, NC State will need to be able to run the ball effectively to try to get the defense out of that too high coverage, right? We will see light boxes. Like, I think we'd be crazy not to see light boxes. You have to stop the pass against NC State.
Right.
And so they have to take advantage of that. So right now, the pass is setting up the run, because the defense, I am predicting, right? We're going to see, we're going to see those big shells. You're going to see a lot of quarters, cover 2, all that kind of stuff. So can we take advantage of it? If we have a box and it's an equal box, let's say we have 5 linemen, 5 guys in the box. There's 6 guys, so we got O-line and a tight end. They got 6 guys in the box. You have a hat on a hat. Can we take advantage of that? At times last year, they didn't. So I'm kind of hoping this year things kind of gel a little bit better. I'm hoping there's a little more patience in the backfield. That was one of the things, at least for me, and you guys might think differently. Ricky Person, I really like Ricky, but at times he drove me crazy. I didn't think he adhered to the run, like, typically on wide zone. Now, I don't know how Coach Roper teaches it, but typically you're getting at least 3 steps before you make your move and you decide which hole you're going to. There are times he was getting the ball and immediately cutting back, and I'm kind of like, you're not going to give your guys a chance to let the blocks develop, right? So I'm hoping with that group we see a little more consistency in terms of their assignment and their technique. I mean, State's going to get good looks. We just have to take advantage of it this year.
Absolutely. Well, because again, obviously, at the end of the day, I think that the run game, just like you said, the run game opens up the passing game, and so at the end of the day, you got to find a way to make it happen. Luckily enough, this year you have options. Even though Jordan Houston is going into it, obviously predominantly the guy. I think again, there's a ton of hype around Demi Sumo. There's a ton of Delbert Mims is a guy I think that can give you a lot, and there's obviously young talent Michael Allen. That's like somebody just give us something, and also too because I know last season that we were that there was a stat kind of getting shared around talking about Devin Leary in the play action, how he's a very good quarterback with the play action. And obviously, I think that's some that you want to offer. Like you don't want to be running a play action play, and defense like you're not handing the ball off. Get out of here. Like, I know what's coming here. And then you're basically setting up with that the defense knows exactly what's coming. So, that's why, to me, it's kind of a double shot in my head because obviously with any game, with any sport, you want the ball to be in your best player's hands, period. Like that's what you want, whether it's basketball, whether it's soccer, whether it's volleyball, you want the ball to be in your best player's hands. And obviously our best player on the field is more likely going to be Devin Leary. And so it's going to be Devin Leary.
I was going to say, well, you don't really in soccer want the ball in the best player's hands. You want
Well,
it on the feet, right?
Well, I'm like basically saying he's the guy that's making the plays. He's the guy I'm talking more than just handing the ball off. I'm talking a guy that was actually taking the play into his own hands. So yeah, that's kind of really my breakdown of it. But really talking about kind of Demi Sumo, really, and Delbert Mims, I think that the report from camp is that those are two guys kind of competing for the backup spot. What do you kind of see from Demi Sumo? Because again, obviously there's, every player, every person is talking about, the hype that Demi Sumo is getting. But what do you kind of see from this little amount of film that I'm sure you probably have on Demi Sumo, that, can kind of give us kind of some insight in terms of why he's getting so much hype as he is.
Yeah, I'll tell you behind the scenes, we've heard, some big talk about Demi, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to finally see it, in action. I think the most we got was the spring game so far, really getting a sense of what he can do. The guy's got size, he's got speed, he's got wiggle. I've heard good things about him breaking ankles in practice. And so Jordan Houston can do it too, but a little bigger size than Sumo, and if he's that full package, can he? There's a lot to see, right? There's more than just running the ball, right? Is he going to be a pass protector, right? State likes to leave running backs in pass protection. They were not a team last year that the running backs didn't get vertical. A lot of times if they got the ball, it was a screen or it was a check. And if there's nobody coming, pocket's good, then they check release, right? They get out into the flat for a check down.
Yeah.
So, but can he do that? Ricky Person was excellent with him. Zonovan Knight needed a little bit of work in that field. Let's be honest about that. So, he seems to physically have the full package, right? And that's why people are so excited. He has what looks to be an excellent build and speed, and he's got juice and he's got wiggle. Can he put it together? When he gets up to the line and, he's got to say, all right, I've got two backers over here. Which one comes, right? I need to know. He needs to know what his tackle's going to do so he can work inside or outside.
Right.
So he's got to really, truly understand the protection packages. That will be the interesting part. Does he know it? Or if he's in there, is that a tell?
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, yeah, we're not going to throw the ball. We like this kid. We think he's got great, running ability. When he's in, we're going to run the ball, and we're going to let somebody else do the pass protection, right? You want to stay away from that kind of one-dimensional player. You want two-way guys, right? And that's what I'm hoping he is, because it seems like there's a ton of potential.
Absolutely. Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need, offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out.
Yeah, I'm I'm curious. Like, I'm glad you brought the pass blocking. I feel like that just gets overlooked a lot of times from the average fan because you're just looking at rushing yards, what I see on the TV. But I mean, I know Jordan's not necessarily the biggest guy, and that was one of my concerns with Jordan. But Delbert, I know we just talked about Demi, but Delbert was a guy that really stood out to me as a guy who flat. And I feel like spring games, you're looking more at the individual players. Delbert was a guy who actually impressed me in the spring game. He seemed to have more run attempt, more options, and for a guy his size, I was excited about. But yeah, I don't know. I am excited about what the potentials for that group. And I think there's a lot of people thinking, oh, well, that's just going to be the weakness. You mentioned earlier, you're going to get defense is probably going to, I'm going to bet that I'm going to force State try to beat me on the ground versus through the air. So there's going to be an opportunity for these guys to be some MVPs, I think, particularly. And then I think probably transitioning naturally late in here is like offensive line. Some of these guys are going to be, guy replacing Ike Quan at left tackle. You're bringing Chandler Zavala back. Like, what are your thoughts about the offensive line, Phillip? I mean, like, do you see the gaps filling in there for those guys? Like, do you see when I say gaps, I mean replacing players, and a lot of those guys I guess Grant Gibson and I said Zavala, McMahon, they're coming back, and those guys have a lot of experience to be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of snaps there. Even your, right now it looks like maybe the swing tackle is going to be Tim McKay, and you're going to have, I think, Easton, maybe your swing guard. So you're probably going to going into game one, ECU. Anthony Belton doesn't really have a lot under his belt right now. He seems to be the clubhouse leader at left tackle. I'll be honest. It was a surprise to me at the spring game when he went out there at left tackle. I was totally anticipating Bryson Speeds to slide from right to left.
I agree.
And so I will say, so I spent time watching him because I was like, all right, I really don't know much about this guy. He's huge. All right. Belton is huge, right? He has the physical frame to play the position. He was a very aggressive left tackle from what I saw, right? Even pass protection. He would kind of jump set at times and really get out there on guys. He wasn't getting deep into a set and, trying to catch him. So what I mean there is, let's say you got an edge rusher and he's trying to run the hoop on you. Can you get back in that vertical set and just almost catch the guy, right? He wasn't necessarily doing that. He was jumping them before they made their move, right? He's physically there. Now, he's going to face a higher caliber pass rusher, right? So we don't fully know the picture. But he looks – I like the temperament. I like the physicality he played with. I know there were a couple snaps where there was some miscommunication on blitz pickup. Those things will get sorted out. Spring game's a great time to have that, right? So let's get it out of our system now. Let's understand why we missed that backer coming or the nickel coming and maybe he didn't slide out far enough, all that kind of stuff. So I like the potential. Grant Gibson coming back was a massive piece.
Yes.
It was a massive piece. Having that center there to direct traffic, to kind of keep everybody in line down there, just a great person, very affable. Really like Grant Gibson.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating. There's a lot of snaps that have been taken. They have to get better. I've said this before, and it'll be interesting. All these guys are almost a year older. The lines that I felt gave them trouble were the big lines. I always felt they struggled with size up front. That's why going back years, like when we do pregame podcasts, when I was looking at a team heading into a game and I looked at that defensive line and I saw, 320 pounders, like I will tell you, I've always felt going into the Miami game, State was going to struggle to run the ball because those nose tackles were huge. I'm hoping we're a little bit better now, maybe a little bit stronger, maybe a little better technique perspective to kind of handle those fronts. Because I do think State's going to see more of those. You're going to see more three down lines. You're going to have big nose tackles. So, I'm hoping we're a little better from that point.
Yeah.
Last point I'll say is it's going to be fascinating from a run game perspective. We talk, they're predominantly zone team from a run game perspective. But in the spring game, right, Tim Beck, now, maybe you guys correct me. Maybe I'm wrong. Did Tim Beck call plays at all? Who called plays during the spring game, especially for the red team, I want to say?
Oh, I don't know.
I'd never heard any.
Do you know when you're asking to see if we get it
No,
right?
No, I don't. And the reason I'm saying is because in the spring game, they ran a lot more counter where they were pulling guys, and they particularly like to pull Dylan McMahon. Like, he is their favorite guy
Yes.
to pull. So I will tell you this, pay attention. When he is left guard, they typically like to pull and they'll run counter to the right because they like to pull him the other way. Now, it looked like practice one the other day, he was the right guard. So where are you going to assume when we
Really?
run counter this year, where were you going to run?
So you had Zavala on the
Probably
left?
going to run to the left, right?
So they had Zavala on the left?
Yeah, so I want to say the starting five at the first practice was Belton, Zavala, Gibson, McMahon, and Spees. Yeah, I want to say that was the ones, at least in the media portion of practice the other day. Right, that's kind of what was described to us. So pay attention to that. Yeah, are they going to run more counter? Was the spring game just a complete fluke?
Right.
And they're not going to run it at the proportion they did. I might have faked myself out all offseason saying, all right, here we come. We're going to look like the 1990 Washington Redskins running OT counter constantly, and we're just going to go back to the wide zone. So it's something to keep in mind as we head into that ECU game.
I got a question here. I'm thinking about this too, because obviously you lose with Icky, and it sounds like there's a lot of confidence in Belton, and if not him, then Spees or McKay or somebody who play that tackle spot to back him up. But State loved running the left last year. That was the stereotype. And I'm not saying they're one direction or the other, but do you believe there might – I mean, you're playing your strength, your offensive line, potentially running behind the center and the guards in this year? Because I would say you have Gibson, Zavala, and McMahon are – that's a solid interior starting offensive line across the ACC, whereas – maybe you're not putting as much pressure on Belton to be like playing, you're not running your best offensive line necessarily behind Belton. You might be running behind Gibson or Zavala. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you might see more inside zone. Split zone is a variation of inside zone. State really likes to run split zone in short yardage situations where, if you're not familiar with it, right, so you'll maybe, let's say they're running inside zone, right? So everybody's working up and to the right, except for that tight end working back across them, and he's taking that left edge, right? And what it does is it kind of creates a crease. Now, so that's something they like to run, particularly in short yardage. They like split zone. So, yeah, absolutely. If they feel the strength is right up the middle, this could be an inside zone team. Or I will tell you, they're towards late in the year, they started running a run concept. You see more in the NFL called duo. And it's really power without the puller is how people describe it. But you want to talk about big bodies, double teams. If they really like the interior, that might be something they go to. You might incorporating more duo into it, right? And these are interior runs. I know sometimes, right, you're up in the stands, fans are like, why do we just run into the line? Why do we just run into the middle, right? But there are some really big positives to doing that. You have to do that to some extent. And the other thing I'll bring up is I'm going to be fascinated to see. My favorite run from last year was the crack toss, where, they would block down and typically they pull Icky out and around. And there were some really big runs. They brought it out against Clemson, I want to say. And then Wake Forest, they had a couple bigs. Now, running it with Ekwonu, gold, baby. It's gold because he's a monster out in the open field. Huge guy, can run.
Those are all the highlight plays for Ekwonu on draft day or whatever. So
will we see that this year, right? Was that kind of a, right, Icky's a special kid, this is what we're going to do? Or do we see a Belton, right? Or do they run it more to the right? Because they had a couple reps to the right, but it was almost dominantly, behind Ekwonu to the left.
Anthony Belton, he was on my list for potential breakout players. I think that he's going to handle that Icky spot very well. With his, you said, his size is insane. That man is huge. Yeah. So I think he's definitely going to step up in that position.
Yeah. Well,
in the spring game, sorry, real quick, talking about his size, his arms, I mean, you could just tell. I want to say there was a rep against Trevally Price, right, where the defensive lineman will do what's called a long arm technique, right? And they're going to take one arm and they're going to get it into the chest of that offensive lineman, right? And they use one arm because you turn your shoulders and you can get your arm out even further than with two hands, right? But Belton was so big, his arms just grabbed him right back. And the long arm did nothing to him because his arms are just so much longer. Even when, I want to say it was Trevally Price, even when he got his shoulders turned into it, it didn't matter. And so, I mean, I saw a play like that, and I'm like, wow. I mean, the stature of a kid like Belton, I mean, just stands out.
For reference, I looked it up while we were talking. He's the biggest offensive lineman on the team. It looks like right now he's 6'6", 330.
Yeah.
So big dude. And he doesn't look like he carries the 330 in a bad way either. So
well, and so one thing which I want to ask you too, since you do break it down so much film as you do, before we kind of wrap up, talking about the tight end, / Trent Banks a little bit, is obviously I think one play call that got a ton of hate or criticism from state fans in particular was the wide receiver screens, tosses to Thayer Thomas, Emeka, whatever it was on the outside, and
third and 25.
Well, and I mean, so did you see more there? Like, could you kind of give us some insight in terms of, because obviously Tim Beck loves that play call. He does it a lot. He does it multiple times a game. And so, do you see there, like, can you give us state fans a little bit of insight in terms of what that really benefits, in terms of for the long term of kind of scheming out the rest of the game of what you can get offensively?
Yeah, so I will tell you, a lot of times those are RPOs. And so, if you're not familiar with the RPO term, which has really become kind of in vogue, I should say, the last few years, right? It's a run pass option. So what we're seeing here, and this, I can remember one in particular against Mississippi State, down at the goal line. I want to say it was like third down. Leary throws it out there, and we get tackled for nothing. You're kind of like, why did we do that? There were a couple guys on the boards like, why did we throw that? People get frustrated when it doesn't work. But what's happening there, right? So the RPO is basic counting, and at least how they're working this play. So you have Devin Leary standing there, and he's basically saying, okay, I've got maybe two receivers out there. Like, I want to say the Mississippi State had two receivers out there. Well, there's only one guy, and maybe one guy's apexing, he's closer to the line, or maybe you have 2-on-2 and you feel good about it. But let's say, all he's doing is saying, do we have numbers in the box, or do we have numbers out wide, right? And we're usually talking numbers on the line. If the safety's 12 yards back, I'm not counting him. We should be able to get that ball, and we should get 5, right? We get 5, we're good, let's move to the next play. So that's really what they're doing, is they're simply counting. Where do I have better numbers? And so on these plays, it's giving Leary the option. And a lot of times he's saying, all right, I like my matchup out there. I like the numbers out there. I'm going to give those guys a chance. And what it builds towards, and State's run some very successful screen and goes. I would love to. I have not asked Devin Carter this question. If you go back and watch the game-winning touchdown catch against Clemson, now the first read that Leary has is a sluggo route on the left side. So that's a slant and go. And Clemson was all over. He had nowhere to go. But if you look at the bottom side of the screen, they were running a screen and go. Right? Devin Carter was up. He was kind of faking that stalk block. And then he releases, and Devin works back to him, working to the back corner. But what that did, that drew up the secondary, kind of left a void in that corner, and Devin Carter kind of just took off into that void. So it wasn't the first read, if I'm seeing that play right, but they kind of went back to it. And so the one thing I'll tell you guys, I'm working right now. I've been watching a lot of film on Western Kentucky because their offensive coordinator, Zach Kitley, is the new offensive coordinator at Texas Tech. If you don't like the bubble screen, you're going to hate that game because Zach Kitley is the master of the bubble screen. And I'll tell you, the RPOs and what they build, the play actions off of it, the screening goes, he has an amazing package of perimeter screens. So September 17th in Carter Finley, I am as a football nerd geeked about that game. So watch Zach Kitley's offense against our defense.
I don't mind running it. I don't mind watching it. I just don't necessarily like running it on third and, like I said, 25 or whatever it was. But hey, that's my thing. I think it's a great play when it works out, especially when you have athletes, guys who are explosive and guys who can block well. So,
but it shows you the blocking on the perimeter could have been better. I have said that now for a while. I like those guys as pass catchers and everything like that, but it is just not the best blocking on the perimeter. We have not had, I would say last year, to me, the best perimeter blocker was C.J. Riley, and now he's gone, right? They brought in Riley to block in a lot of those situations, or they would throw a flare to the running back. Riley was typically a blocker in those situations. So, hey, Riley was not a big catch guy, but he had importance in this offense. So how do they replace that?
Well, I will add in here real quickly, being that I was, equipment manager while Riley was there. watching his career, I just can't help but just think about going, man, that dude, he could have been so much more than he was. Like how tall he was and how fast he was, but also how athletic he was. I mean, like that Texas A&M bowl game catch. I mean, that right there is basically just all the evidence I need to show you. In terms of that guy could have been so much more for NC State, unfortunately, than he was, unfortunately, due to injuries. But anyway, though, so kind of wrapping it up here with the tight end. So, I mean, obviously, there's two main guys you talk about. One is not really a tight end in Trent Penix, but, he's kind of a J-Sam where he's running back, slot receiver,
whatever,
tight end, whatever. And, but, I mean, that's another guy that I honestly was impressed. I honestly expected him to transfer sooner than he was. But then, obviously, last year he broke out. Was amazing. So like a couple of plays, obviously the Louisville touchdown and then the Florida State touchdown are two plays I think of that. I mean, you saw that explosiveness I think that Doeren has been waiting for. And so can you kind of talk to me a little bit more in terms of what did you kind of see from Penix in terms of how was he set up to be successful last year, to have the, few breakout plays like he did? And do you see Tim Beck maybe using him a little bit more in some different ways or kind of some more of the same?
I mean, I think you can get really creative with him. If the one thing I would start adding more pop passes to him, really more in the interior of the defense. So I mean, think back to some of his big plays. A lot of them were based off him kind of aligning off, so he's off the line, and it's basically run looks that he's faking a block. So let's say, for example, a slide route where he's it looks like split zone, he's working across, and then he kind of dekes that lineman and gets out to the flat. He had some big catches. I know there was a big one, I want to say first quarter Wake Forest, where he did that. And then he had the big one against Louisville, right? Now, that was maybe the year before that I'm thinking of, right? But that's them kind of getting out, faking that sweep. He's faking that block, and then he breaks out. So, that's really where he's been at his best and where they've hit him. It's playing the run, the pass off the run, I should say. Now, it's going to be fascinating. From the tight end perspective, who was our best run blocker last year? I mean, I think it's fair to say it was Parham.
Yes.
Parham was our best pass blocker. And, State is predominantly an 11 personnel team. So typically it's one tight end at a time. I did think at times last year you could tell when they were going to run or throw based on which tight end was in the game in certain situations. So now this year, the one thing we have to watch, right, are Tootle. I know Tootle, one of the things they talked about putting on weight, putting on muscle and stuff like that, because we're going to need those guys to be, and I'm not saying they're bad, don't get me wrong, but we need them to be better two-way players. It can't be all pass, right? They have to be able to stick their nose in there and seal a defensive end, to block down on inside zone. They're going to have to be able to do those things. And so, to be honest with you, that's kind of what I'm looking for, early in the season for our progression at that position. Are these now true two-way players, or do we really just have pass catchers lining up?
I think that wraps up nicely again, because I think that we all know what Tootle can do in terms of catching the ball. I think that he's a guy, I mean, for as young as he is, I think that he has definitely a bright future ahead of him in terms of catching the football for sure. I think that, just like you said, if you can add that second way in terms of being a respectable run blocker, then, I mean, the sky's the limit for him, honestly. Because, I mean, I think Shannon Sharp of the NFL said it best, if you want to make a lot of money in the NFL, catch passes. But in order to get to the NFL, they still want you to be at least respectable from a run blocking perspective. So again, a lot there for sure. I think that we all can agree that there's a lot of potential there for the offense this year. Some questions for sure, but I think that, specifically, if you have a couple of guys that can break out or at least be respectable, that the rest of the game will take care of itself and honestly could carry us to great heights for sure. But again, Phillip, I want to say thank you so much again for joining us. Really do appreciate your insights. And again, I'll definitely say to all of our viewers as well, listeners, I mean, obviously, if you haven't already checked out IPS and specifically checked out the IPS League, make sure to do that. That is a must do. Yeah, that is a must do for sure. Make sure to do that. But again, Phillip, I want to say thank you so much again. Really do appreciate your time.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Had a great time chatting with you guys.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And again, for all of us as well, again, just as a reminder, if you haven't checked out our channel memberships already, make sure to do that. Again, very cheap price, a ton of value there, whether it's a private Discord, exclusive Tuffy Talk videos and also to exclusive weekly newsletters as well. And then hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever we release any new in-state content. And also to give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter, Instagram, as well as IPS as well. Thank you all so much again for your time. As always, go Pack, y'all. We'll see y'all soon.